You know that feeling when your alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and your brain immediately starts listing every single reason why you should just stay in bed. It's too cold. I'm tired. I'll start tomorrow. I've been working so hard already. I deserve a break. And the worst part? You believe it. Every single time. You tell yourself you want to change. You want to get fit, build something, push harder, live bigger. But there's this invisible wall, this ceiling, that you keep bumping your head against. And no matter how many motivational quotes you read, no matter how many podcasts you listen to, that wall doesn't move. Because here's the thing nobody wants to hear. The wall isn't outside of you. It's inside your head. And there's one man on this planet who figured that out the hard way, not by reading about it in some self-help book, not by going to a seminar, but by literally running until his feet bled, training until his heart nearly stopped, and dragging himself through the darkest corners of human suffering just to prove one thing, that the mind is the most powerful weapon you will ever own. His name is David Goggins, and the book we're talking about today, Can't Hurt Me, is not a self-help book. It's not a fitness guide. It's not a memoir. It's a war cry. So sit down, take a breath, and get ready. Because by the time this video is over, you're never gonna look at your limits the same way again. Before we get into the lessons, let me tell you a little about the man behind this book. Because David Goggins isn't some guy who had a great childhood, went to a good school, and then found his passion at 22. No, his story starts in darkness. David Goggins was born in 1975 in Buffalo, New York. His early childhood was defined by abuse. His father was violent, controlling, and terrifying. The family lived under fear. By the time David was a teenager, he had witnessed things no child should ever see. He and his mother eventually escaped, but the trauma didn't leave. It settled into his bones. He struggled in school. He had a learning disability. He was overweight. He battled with low self-esteem so deep that just looking in the mirror felt like punishment. He once weighed nearly 300 pounds. He worked as an exterminator, spraying cockroaches in restaurants at night, afraid to dream because dreaming had never worked for him. But one day, one single television moment, everything shifted. He saw a documentary about Navy SEALs, about the training known as Hell Week, and something cracked open inside him. Not inspiration exactly, more like recognition. He thought, that's what I need. Not comfort, not ease, suffering with purpose. There was one problem. He was 300 pounds, and he needed to be under 191 to even apply. He had less than 3 months. Most people would have laughed at themselves and gone back to the couch. David Goggins lost 106 pounds in 3 months. That is not a typo. And then he went to SEAL training. Failed the first time, then tried again. Failed parts again and kept going. He became not just a Navy SEAL, but eventually one of the most decorated special operations soldiers in U.S. history. He became an Army Ranger. He completed the most elite training programs the U.S. military offers. He ran ultramarathons to 100-mile races through deserts and mountains multiple times. He set the Guinness World Record for pull-ups, doing over 4,017 hours. And through all of it, he wrote about what was happening in his mind. Can't Hurt Me was published in 2018 and became an instant bestseller. But unlike most bestsellers, this one doesn't comfort you. It challenges you. It grabs you by the collar and says, stop making excuses. Stop lying to yourself. You have not come close to your limits, and the only way to find them is to go way beyond what feels comfortable. This video is a deep breakdown of the core lessons in this book, and I'm going to try my best to do it justice. The first lesson in this book, and honestly, the one that sets the foundation for everything else, is this. Stop blaming everything outside of you. Start owning everything inside of you. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That's easy for him to say. He doesn't know what I've been through. He doesn't know my situation. And here's the thing. David Goggins knows exactly what it's like to have a terrible situation. He didn't get a pass. He wasn't born into privilege. He had an abusive father. He grew up poor. He had a learning disability. He was called the N-word more times than he could count. He carried every disadvantage society could throw at a person. And his message isn't your circumstances don't matter. His message is your circumstances are not your destiny. There's a huge difference. He talks about what he calls taking inventory, looking at your life with brutal, unflinching honesty. Not the version of yourself you show on Instagram, the real one. The one that knows you've been slacking. The one that knows you've been using your pain as an excuse instead of using it as fuel. Think about it this way. Imagine two people who both grew up in difficult homes. Same neighborhood, same schools, same struggles. One of them turns 30 and says, "My life is this way because of what happened to me." The other turns 30 and says, "My life has been hard, and I'm going to use that hardness to build something the world has never seen." Same starting point, completely different ending. The difference isn't talent. It isn't luck. It isn't even opportunity. It's the decision to take ownership. Goggins talks about a moment in his life where he realized something devastating. He had been living as a victim of his own story. He had been letting the narrative his father wrote for him. The narrative that said you're worthless, you're nothing, you'll never be anything, define who he was. And the day he stopped letting that story control him was the day his transformation truly began. In practical terms, this lesson looks like this. Stop saying, "I can't," and start saying, "I haven't yet." Stop saying, "I'm not good enough," and start asking, "What do I need to do to get good enough?" Stop looking for permission from someone else to pursue your life. Nobody is coming to save you. Nobody is going to knock on your door and say, "Hey, I heard you've been struggling. Let me give you a shortcut." That is not how this works. You have to decide on your own, in the quiet of your own mind, that you are worth fighting for, and then fight. That's lesson 1. Now here's where it gets personal. Goggins introduces one of the most powerful tools in this entire book, something he calls the accountability mirror. And it's simple, almost embarrassingly simple, but its power is real. The idea is this. Every morning, you stand in front of a mirror, and you look yourself in the eyes. Not a glance, not a quick check of your hair. You actually look at yourself, and you speak the truth. You say out loud, "This is where I am. This is what I've been avoiding. This is what I'm afraid of. This is what I keep lying to myself about." When Goggins was trying to turn his life around, when he was 300 pounds and broke and working as a pest control guy, he would stand in front of his bathroom mirror and put sticky notes on the glass. Each one had a goal. Each one had a truth. And every day, he had to look at those notes and either say, "I did what I said I'd do," or admit, "I didn't. And here's why. And here's what I'm going to do about it." No pity, no excuses. Just the mirror. Just the truth. I want you to think about how uncomfortable that is for most people. We live in a world that is designed to help you avoid the mirror. Social media is a highlight reel. Entertainment is constant. Food is convenient. Distraction is literally engineered by the smartest people in Silicon Valley to keep you from sitting with yourself. Because the moment you sit with yourself, the moment you actually face your own reflection, you have to reckon with what you see. And what do most people see? Not the hero, not the warrior, but someone who knows they're capable of more. Someone who's been playing small. Someone who's been telling themselves comfortable lies. The accountability mirror doesn't let you do that. It's not about being cruel to yourself. It's not about self-hatred. It's about self-honesty. There's a massive difference. Self-hatred says you're terrible and worthless. Self-honesty says, here's the gap between who I am and who I could be, and I choose to close it. Try this tonight. Stand in front of your mirror. Look at yourself for 30 seconds without looking away. Then ask yourself just one question. Am I becoming the person I'm capable of becoming? If the answer is yes, great. Keep going. If the answer is no, then this book and this video is for you. Alright, let's talk about the thing everyone wants, but almost nobody actually builds. Mental toughness. And I want to start by destroying a myth. A lot of people think mental toughness is a personality trait. Like some people are just born tough, and some people aren't. Like it's genetic. Like it's luck of the draw. Goggins would call that one of the most dangerous lies a person can believe. Mental toughness is not inherited. It is built. Brick by brick, rep by rep, choice by choice, every single day. He describes it like calluses on your hands. When you first start working with your hands, maybe you're doing manual labor or rock climbing or weight training, your hands blister. They hurt, they bleed. But over time, the skin thickens, it hardens. And eventually, what used to break through your skin can't touch you anymore. Your mind works the same way. Every time you choose discomfort over comfort, your mind gets a little tougher. Every time you push through when every fiber of your being is screaming stop, you lay down another layer of armor. And it accumulates, slowly, painfully, but permanently. Goggins tells the story of Hell Week in SEAL training. 5.5 days with no sleep, running hundreds of miles in cold water, sand in every crevice of your body, your mind and body completely broken. Most people quit. Not because their bodies give out first, because their minds do. The body can endure almost anything. It's the mind that waves the white flag. He learned during Hell Week that the body sends signals long before it actually needs to stop. You feel exhausted at 40% of your capacity. You feel like you're dying when you're actually fine. The pain, the fatigue, the desire to quit, most of it is a negotiation, not a reality. And this is a lesson that applies to your life right now, not just extreme military training. Think about when you're in the gym and you're on your last set and your muscles are burning and your brain says, "That's enough. You've done enough today." What if that voice is lying to you? What if you have 3 more reps left? 3 reps that would actually change you, and you're walking away because your brain is negotiating a surrender your body doesn't actually need. Or think about when you're working on something hard, a project, a business, a skill, and you hit a wall and your brain says, "Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should try something else." What if that resistance is the exact moment when growth is about to happen, and you're quitting right before the breakthrough? Mental toughness is the practice of staying when leaving is easier, of doing when not doing is more comfortable, of continuing when stopping feels justified. Goggins didn't become mentally tough by reading about it. He built it in increments. He set small, terrifying goals. He did things that scared him every single day, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he knew the other side of suffering was a version of himself he couldn't reach any other way. And that's the invitation for you. What is one thing you've been avoiding because it's hard? What is one thing you keep putting off because the discomfort is too real? Start there. That's your first brick. Okay, this one. This lesson might be the single most mind-bending idea in the entire book. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It's called the 40% rule. Here's the concept. When your mind is telling you that you're done, that you've reached your limit, that you can't go any further, you are actually only at about 40% of what you are capable of. Read that again. Let it sink in. The moment you feel like quitting is not the moment you've hit your ceiling. It's the moment you've hit a mental barrier. And behind that barrier is 60% more of your actual capacity, sitting untouched, unexplored, unlived. Goggins discovered this through pure, brutal trial and error. During a 24-hour ultra-endurance race, he entered with almost no training, something called the Badwater ultramarathon preparation. He was running massive distances in conditions that would hospitalize most people. His body started breaking down. Literally, he developed stress fractures. His feet were destroying themselves inside his shoes. Every step was agony. His brain was screaming at him, "Stop, you're done. This is over." But he discovered something. That voice, the one telling him he was done, was not the final authority. It was a first responder, doing its job, trying to protect him. But it wasn't accurate. It was premature. And if he could get past it, he'd find a second wind. And after that, a third. And after that, something beyond any wind. A state of pure willpower, operating completely outside the normal rules of human endurance. He calls it the cookie jar in another part of the book, a mental storehouse of every hard thing you've ever survived. Every battle you've already won, that you can reach into when you feel like you've got nothing left. But the 40% rule is deeper than a motivational concept. It has scientific backing. Research in exercise. Psychology consistently shows that people quit physical challenges well before their bodies are actually at their physiological maximum. The brain initiates the quit signal early. It's a protective mechanism. And people who train themselves to override that signal don't just perform better physically. They develop a fundamentally different relationship with hardship. So here's the question the 40% rule forces you to ask in your own life. When was the last time you actually hit your limit? Not what felt like your limit. Not what your comfort zone told you was your limit. Your actual biological, physiological limit? For most of us, honestly, for almost all of us, the answer is never. We've never actually been to our limit. We've been to the first warning bell, and we turn back. Every single time. Just imagine, what your life would look like if you started pushing to 50%, to 60%. Not all at once, not tomorrow, but incrementally, deliberately, over months and years. Who would you become? What would you build? What dreams would stop being fantasies and start being blueprints? The 40% rule isn't just about physical performance. It applies to your career, your relationships, your creativity, your courage. Every time you avoid a hard conversation because it's uncomfortable, you're stopping at 40%. Every time you submit work you know isn't your best because it's good enough, you're stopping at 40%. Every time you choose the Netflix binge over the late-night practice session that could change your trajectory, minus 40%. The real question is, are you willing to find out what the other 60% looks like? Let's talk about pain and fear, because these two things stop more human potential than almost anything else on Earth. Now, I'm not going to tell you pain isn't real. It is. Physical pain is real. Emotional pain is real. The pain of rejection, of failure, of loss, all of it is real. Goggins doesn't deny that. What he challenges is the response to pain. Most of us have been conditioned to treat pain as a stop sign. The moment something hurts, physically or emotionally, we retreat. We protect ourselves. We find ways to numb it. We eat, we scroll, we sleep, we distract. Anything to get away from the feeling. Goggins decided to treat pain as a road sign, not a stop sign. A road sign that says, this is where something important is happening. Pay attention. He made a choice, and it wasn't an easy or comfortable choice, to run toward discomfort instead of away from it. Not because he was a masochist, not because he enjoyed suffering for its own sake, but because he understood that growth lives on the other side of resistance. And resistance always shows up as pain, or fear, or discomfort. Fear, especially, is something Goggins addresses with unusual directness. He's afraid. He was always afraid. Before races, before training, before facing the darkest parts of his past, he felt fear. Real, physical, stomach-churning fear. And he did it anyway. That's the whole lesson, really. The goal isn't to eliminate fear. The goal is to develop the habit of action in the presence of fear. To train yourself deliberately, repeatedly, to move forward when everything in you wants to stand still or run backwards. There's a concept in psychology called fear extinction. The process of reducing fear responses by repeatedly exposing yourself to the thing you're afraid of without the catastrophic outcome you imagined. Every time you face something scary and survive it, your brain updates its threat model. Oh, I did that. I didn't die. It was hard, but I made it. And the next time, the fear is a little smaller. Not gone, smaller. Goggins built his entire life around this principle, long before he knew the science behind it. He went toward the hardest things he could find, not because he was fearless, but because he understood that the version of him he wanted to become was on the other side of every fear he refused to face. Think about your own life. What are you afraid of right now? Not the monster under the bed stuff, the real things. Failure, rejection, looking stupid, being wrong, starting over, losing what you have. Now ask yourself, what is staying away from that fear actually cost you? How many opportunities have you passed on? How many relationships haven't started because you were too afraid to say the first word? How many businesses haven't launched because failure seemed more real than success? Pain and fear are not your enemies. They're your guides. They're pointing you directly toward where your growth is waiting. Here's a truth that nobody likes hearing. Motivation is a liar. It comes and goes. It shows up in waves, usually after a really good video or a great conversation or a terrible day that woke something up in you. And then it disappears, sometimes within hours. And you're back to the same couch, the same habits, the same comfort zones. Goggins doesn't talk much about motivation. He talks about discipline. And there's a critical difference. Motivation asks, do I feel like doing this right now? Discipline asks, did I commit to doing this? Motivation is emotional. It requires you to feel a certain way before you act. Discipline is mechanical. It runs regardless of how you feel. Goggins woke up at 3 a.m. every day, not because he felt inspired at 3 a.m., not because he loved the darkness and the cold and the solitude before dawn. He did it because he had decided he would, because the version of himself he was becoming required that level of commitment. And feelings don't get a vote once the decision is made. This is one of the hardest concepts for people to genuinely internalize in the age we live in. We are surrounded by instant gratification. Everything is fast. Everything is easy. You can have food in 20 minutes. You can find entertainment in 10 seconds. You can get answers in milliseconds. And we've started applying that same logic to personal growth. We expect transformation to feel good and happen quickly. Goggins is here to tell you that transformation is slow, ugly, painful, and mostly invisible to everyone around you, especially in the beginning. You won't see the results for weeks, maybe months. You'll be putting in the work and feeling like nothing is changing. And that is exactly the moment when most people stop. That's the graveyard of potential, the space between effort and visible result, where discipline lives and motivation dies. Consistency is the superpower. Not intensity, consistency. Showing up every day, doing the thing, even when it's imperfect, even when you're tired, even when life is chaotic and you only have 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. 20 disciplined minutes every day beats one epic session every 2 weeks. Always. Goggins talks about his daily train routines, not as a point of pride, but as a blueprint for anyone who wants to build something. He didn't get where he is through inspiration. He got there through the relentless, boring, painful practice of doing the same hard things over and over until they became who he was. That's what discipline does. It stops being something you do and starts being something you are. So here's the practical takeaway. Pick one thing, just one, that you need to be consistent about. Don't pick 3. Don't try to overhaul your entire life this week. Pick one thing and commit to it every single day for the next 30 days. Not based on how you feel, but based on the decision you made. Let that be your first act of discipline. Let that be your first brick. We've been building to this. All the lessons, the accountability, the mental toughness, the 40% rule, the discipline, they're all in service of this final idea. You don't know what you're capable of, and the only way to find out is to go further than you've ever gone before. Not once, not as a bucket list item, as a lifestyle. Goggins talks about the concept of the cookie jar in detail, a mental archive of every hard thing you've ever overcome. Every time you pushed through something that seemed impossible, every time you surprised yourself, every time the voice said, "You can't," and you did it anyway. The cookie jar is your most important asset in moments of crisis. When you're in the middle of something brutal, when you're on mile 70 of a 100-mile race, or you're in month 3 of building something and nothing is working, or you're sitting with grief that feels unbearable, you reach into the cookie jar. You pull out a memory. I survived that. I got through that. If I did that, I can get through this. He tells the story of a particular race, the San Diego one day, where he went in undertrained, undertested, and broke multiple bones in his feet around mile 70. His feet were in compression socks, filling with fluid. Every step was trauma. Doctors at the aid station told him to stop. His body was screaming at him to stop. He finished the race, not because it was smart, not because it was medically advisable, but because he needed to know where his actual limit was. And he still hadn't found it. Now, and this is important, I'm not telling you to injure yourself. I'm not telling you to ignore legitimate medical warnings or push your body to the point of permanent damage. Goggins himself will tell you he made mistakes that cost him long-term. What I am telling you is this. Most of us stop nowhere near that extreme. Most of us stop at the first sign of discomfort. Most of us have never once genuinely tested what we're made of. Not because we're cowards, but because nobody ever told us that was the point. Nobody ever framed life as a testing ground for the deepest version of who you could be. Goggins frames it that way, every day, every workout, every challenge, every moment of fear or failure. He asks himself, and he asks you, one question constantly: what am I capable of? Not in a boastful way, in a genuine, honest, terrifying way. Because the honest answer is, you don't know yet. And you won't know until you push. And you won't push unless you decide, right now, today, that finding out is worth the discomfort. He describes moments of what he calls callousing the mind, deliberately putting yourself into uncomfortable situations, not because they serve an immediate purpose, but because they build the internal architecture of someone who can handle anything. Cold showers, fasting, running when you'd rather drive, having the hard conversation instead of sending the text. Small, daily acts of chosen difficulty that quietly reshape what you're made of. And here's the beautiful, strange truth at the core of all of this. The people who push the hardest, the people who go the furthest into discomfort and difficulty, often report that their lives feel more meaningful, not less. Not in spite of the suffering, because of what the suffering reveals. They find out they're tougher than they thought, more resilient, more alive. When you're pushing your limits, you're not numb, you're not scrolling, you're not distracted. You are fully present in the only life you have. And there is a kind of electricity in that, a kind of luminous, terrifying, beautiful aliveness that you simply cannot find in comfort. We've covered a lot today. A lot of ideas, a lot of stories, a lot of challenges. But I want to end with something human, something real. Because this book, Can't Hurt Me, is not a book about becoming superhuman. It's not a book about competing with David Goggins. It's not a book that says you need to run 100 miles or survive military training or break world records to have a meaningful life. It's a book about honesty, about standing in front of that mirror and refusing to look away, about deciding that the gap between who you are and who you could be is not acceptable anymore, about choosing not once, but every single day to be a little harder to defeat. David Goggins grew up in a house full of violence. He was broken by his father before he was old enough to understand what was happening. He spent years after that, broken in different ways, by poverty, by failure, by the crushing weight of a self-image that told him he was nothing, and he rebuilt himself. Not perfectly, not without cost. He'll be the first one to tell you the price was high. But he rebuilt himself into something that the child in that broken house could never have imagined. And the tool he used, the only tool, was his mind. Not equipment, not money, not connections or luck or talent. His mind. The same tool you have right now, reading this, watching this, breathing and thinking and feeling and wondering if any of this applies to you. It does. Whatever you're going through, whatever wall you've been standing in front of, whatever excuse has felt too real to push past, whatever version of yourself you've been settling for, you are not done. Not even close. You've barely started. The road forward is hard. Of course it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. That's how you know it's real. That's how you know it matters. The resistance you feel isn't a sign you're on the wrong path. It's a sign you're on the right one, and the trail just got steep. So here's what I want to leave you with. Not as a checklist, not as a homework assignment, but as a question to carry with you. Who would you become? Who would you actually become if you stop stopping? Think about that. Really sit with it. Because that version of you, the one who doesn't stop, who doesn't negotiate with comfort, who shows up every single day and does the hard thing, that person is not some fantasy. That person is not beyond your reach. That person is you, minus the excuses. Go find out what you're made of. Can't hurt me.